In this episode of On Point with Korem, I sat down with Matt O'Connell. He's the former CEO of GEOEYE and now an operating partner at Data Collective Venture Capital. Matt long ago saw the value of satellite imagery as part of the data marketplace, not just as something that generated too many pixels. We also talked about how technology is being used in areas in transportation and logistics, and he takes the perspective of how the data is really part of information arbitrage. I think you'll find this discussion absolutely fascinating with someone who takes a financial perspective on geospatial technology. Please stay tuned for another episode of On Point. Well, Matt, thanks for taking the time to do this with me. I want to take you back to some of the old days where you were a CEO of GEOEYE before the merger with Digital Globe. And one of my observations, because I came out of that business in satellite remote sensing, and it seemed back then that there were two types of clients. You either had government clients and maybe everybody else. But the business model of the satellite companies back then seemed to be differentiated into very two, and there wasn't much growth beyond that. Is that a fair assessment of where the business was maybe 5 or 10 years ago?
Absolutely, Joe. I mean, not surprisingly, you're right on the money. You know, I remember getting into the business and in say 2001, 2002, and I wanted to go into the commercial industry, but there really was no commercial industry. We didn't get Google Earth until 2005. I had been in the cable industry, and in the cable industry, we say before HBO and after HBO, because HBO literally changed the landscape. I can get movies on TV. Same with Google Earth. Everybody in the geospatial industry should still salute Google Earth because it was the biggest promotional mechanism any of us had. Post 2005, people in the agriculture industry could look at Google Earth and say, well, I'd like to see what I have. The real estate industry, the transportation industry. So you didn't get much commercial until after 2005. And even when we sold GEOEYE in 2013, you know, I would say of our $1 billion valuation, 2/3 was government related. And then within government, I would say 3/4 was defense and intel. So most of it was defense and intel, and then some of it was government civilian, and then you had some commercial. Google was a terrific client. We took Google away from Digital Globe early on, and I had a great relationship with those guys. But we realized at the time there was a sort of a land grab. They were all trying to map the world, and I said, folks, they're going to taper off. So let's find some replacement stuff, which is why I went into products and services.
So let me pick up on that a little bit, because in the intervening 10 years or so since that time, certainly Google has floated the boat of a lot of the geospatial industry. What's changed since then in terms of the uptake in commercial? Is there, and the way I want to ask that is there really an understanding of the value of imagery as a product, as a data product, as something where you derive information from it, versus the pretty picture that we see on Google Earth?
Great question, Joe. I think that the industry specialists, you know, like the guy who runs the contract between the US government and the geospatial industry, I know him. I never mention people by name in the intel community. But we were standing at a reception in Monterey, and he said, you know, I've told the guys at Maxar and Planet Labs, which I should say is a DCVC company where I work. He said a couple of years ago, I don't want imagery anymore. I want products, I want trends, I want analysis. So he gets it. Most people don't get it. And we are still educating people as to the value of imagery and what it can tell you. That's where I think companies like yours, Korem, come in, because you've got to help most people realize the value of context. It's not just a pretty picture, it's where am I, where is my product, where is my customer, how do I get one thing from one place to another, and how are the dynamics of that transportation going to affect people? You look at what's going on in the supply chain right now, Joe. We have a historic number of ships off of the port of LA and Long Beach. Port of LA and Long Beach is the biggest port in the Western Hemisphere, and it has never had as many ships sitting at anchor for 2, sometimes 3 weeks. So, the lockdown came, people had to order stuff more because they couldn't go out. And shipping has just, I writ large, trucks, trains, boats, having people understand how location information can help them solve those problems is still something we spend a lot of time on educating. And that's why I'm glad you do these kind of podcasts, is to get the word out and say to people, we can help you solve your problems. We can help you make more efficient decisions. Then, of course, tying those systems together, which is kind of what you guys do for a living, you've got to tie those systems together so that ordering then knows how to talk to something else. A friend of mine made a huge hit on food delivery in Saudi Arabia. And one thing he did was tie the order to inventory. Oh, you've made 150 pizzas. You're going to run out of tomato paste on Thursday if you don't order more tomato paste. And, that kind of information and decision making is really valuable.
So in the satellite business, and this is where I think the rubber kind of meets the road, in particular with today's cloud native processing, machine learning, which is another interesting buzzword. We used to call it image classification when I started. Now they come up with the term machine learning, which I think is always interesting, right? We got to change the nomenclature just to think that we're in the know. Sorry, that's an editorial response.
Hey, you're the consultants. So you do this for the rest of us.
But anyway, it was always hard back then. You do image processing, you don't want, as you just said, you don't want the pretty picture, you don't want the raw data, you want the answer, right? I got to have the answer. You want to know, how am I going to get that tomato paste over to my, pizza parlor? And that's not, there's a disconnect between the data, the raw data, and the answer. And I think that that's still a main problem for our industry, and at least educating the commercial side of the business. The government guys get it, but the commercial maybe not.
I think that the smarter operators do. If you read the quotes about different people going public, I'm limited in what I can say about Planet Labs because they're a company of ours and they're going through the SPAC right now. One thing they said is, well, we don't think we're going to spend a lot more money on satellites. We've got a good constellation up there. We're, generating a lot of valuable data. We're going to spend more on products and analytics. And when I got recruited from Seraphim to DCVC just about a year ago, literally right as COVID started. Odd timing. But I had gone to see Planet in February before that, February of last year. And all I wanted to talk about with Robbie Schingler, one of the two founders, was products and analytics. I said, you got a lot of beautiful data. How do you make it more usable? When you think about it, what Steve Jobs did was he didn't actually develop stuff that wasn't around. I saw a small music device like the iPhone before Apple came out with it. Jobs made it easy. He made technology easy. If you can make technology easy, that's where you make a ton of money. And I think we're still working on that in this industry. The industry was founded kind of by engineers for engineers. And the reason why GEOEYE grew so fast is we tried to simplify it. We also tried to figure out what the client wanted and then work with them on that. And that's not easy. So we've gone from the industrial age in this industry where we were bending metal. Now we're in the information age where we're bending pixels. Right. And it's not, how can you bend the tin to get it to do what I want? Can you do an orbit at this level? Can you have this kind of camera? Now it's, okay, I've got these pixels. How do I tie them together? Or how do you tie together different sources of information? I hired a guy to be my CTO, Brian O'Toole. Brian is now running Black Sky, and he's doing something very clever. He takes feeds from the social networks and other people like Hawkeye 360. But no, those are not my companies, by the way, but I like them both. And so as they're going over the world, their satellites say, hey, the Twitter feeds are way up over Yemen. Let's use that to tip and cue the satellite. Let's point the satellite at Yemen. And maybe we'll derive some information. And then automatically, this is something I created. I had said to Brian, I want to look at social networks and I want it to be automatic. So automatically an email goes from Black Sky to NGA. Hey, Twitter feeds up, shot it in Yemen. You want it? And one machine talks to another. They go through different parameters and they say, oh, that's interesting. We have connected Black Sky and Hawkeye, both of them, with Capella, which is one of our companies. They have small satellites for SAR, radar, and they can see at night in storms. We've also connected them with Hawkeye 360 and Spire. I mean, we're trying to get them talk to everybody. It's when you combine different sources of information, that's when you get some really interesting products. That's also when you get complexity, which is great for a company like yours, Korem, because putting all these different products together ain't easy. You know, SAR imagery is different from EO, is different from drones, but you put them together and that's when you get some real razzle dazzle.
Yeah, you said a couple interesting things there, I want to pick up on, one of which is the source analytics side of it, which is putting together other location-based data with satellite imagery. I'd never thought of that before, but that's an interesting application where you want to derive certain information from certain geographies because other things are happening. And I can certainly see that even in the commercial space with mobile trace data, where all of a sudden you've got this collection of people downtown Starbucks. What the heck is going on there? Oh, well, pumpkin spice latte just came out. I mean, it's a weird analogy to what the Intel space is doing, but it's similar in respect.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what did Waze teach us? If you want to map roads and if you want to know where traffic is, satellites are great, but the cell phone's better. It's tracking everybody. I don't want to get political, but a friend of mine said he wasn't going to get a shot because he thought people could be tracked if you had a shot. And I said, you got a credit card and a cell phone. Trust me, they know exactly what you are and they know how many lattes you're buying. I told the guys at Spire, you track ships. I told the guys at Black Sky, one of your products is pictures of ports. I said, let's get together. Then we tell the ship operators, hey, throttle back. When you get to the port of Los Angeles, you're going to have to sit for 2 weeks. Why burn up the oil? Sit down, So there are a lot of interesting developments. One of the things that is very gratifying is, so launch costs have come way down. SpaceX was a great help. Blue is helping. A company we've invested in, Rocket Labs, is helping. If one of the biggest costs comes down, launch, then you can put more up there. Then you can try this new stuff, and then you can say, hey, this works, this doesn't work. And you come up with new products. So that's very exciting for people. At the same time, COVID kind of unsettled the capital markets, but there is a whole lot of money going into space right now. It's a great time to be an investor if you have stuff. So we're glad we got into Rocket Labs early. It's nice to be able to share their upside in the SPAC. Same with Planet. One of the things that we are constantly challenged by is now everybody comes along and they may not have even gone to space and they say, well, we're worth $1 billion.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I know you can't say too much about the companies you're invested in, but when I heard Will Marshall come out and say, hey, we're a data company, that was a real change in focus of the satellite image companies. And, it was kind of, to me, it was a repositioning of, we're not just gathering pixels anymore, we're really gathering information. And frankly, I think the whole geospatial industry has transitioned from just the software phase, and now data is more important. So I was happy to hear Marshall say that. And that's where the money is, right? It's in that data, it's in the information.
I totally agree. But then I said it in 2002. I got into GEOEYE. I took the rockets models and the satellite models out of the lobby, and I put them in the satellite operating center, and there was this riot, literally. The employee said, "What are you doing?" I said, "We're not a satellite company." And they said, "What?" I said, "We're a data information company." And it was a big challenge. Now, I will say I was gratified to hear, I was more, hearing Will say we're an information company was like, yeah, I said that, what, 20 years ago? Yeah, 20 years ago. Hearing him say we're going to invest in products and analytics, that really appealed to me, because people have been talking about being information companies, Digital Globe, Maxar, but they've never really committed the funds to do that. And Walter Scott of Digital Globe,
Oh, yeah.
very smart guy, but he's a rocket and satellite guy by training, not a software guy. I hired Brian O'Toole, who's now running Black Sky, because Brian was a software guy. You have to have the software products, and then you have to have people who will stitch it all together, because all the different systems have to work with each other, and then they have to work with the client's information. I'm looking a lot at logistics right now, because the supply chain is so messed up, and frankly, it's a much bigger industry. Mapping is nice, but it's what, a 10 billion, maybe 20 billion a year. Logistics is somewhere between 150 billion and a trillion, depending on how much of the infrastructure you count. So I heard something interesting. Somebody has technology that will make trucking yards more efficient, but one of the operators said, yeah, but I'm not replacing my yard management system. So this little company came up with a smart way to do it on a SaaS basis, and said, you don't have to replace your system, just drag our tools down to your legacy system, even if your legacy system is 15 years old and a piece of junk. But I think that you have to invest in the data and analytics, and then you have to figure out in your go-to-market plan how to make it easy for the customers. I'm sure that that's a lot of what you guys are doing at Korem, because it is not easy to put all these different imagery sources together, all the information sources, and then have the different systems talk to each other.
Well, and I think you raised a good point. I mean, the transportation and logistics industry is, I think, a key industry. Certainly is a key industry for us at Korem. But more to the point, it gets downstream. It gets the information downstream from the collection device to the actual use and analytics. And you're right. I mean, we so depend from an e-commerce standpoint about ETA, right? I want to know exactly when my stuff is going to be delivered. And here we are approaching the holiday season, where e-commerce is going to explode again. We're still in the Delta variant situation. And that's where I see the potential. You obviously see the potential in the transportation field. And you're right, it's ripe for the picking for Geo.
Yeah, I read the Wall Street Journal logistics column every day now, and some might say that it's depressing. The BBC just had an article about shipping has never had more bottlenecks. Well, that's not depressing. I see opportunity. That's what entrepreneurs do, is look for pain. How can I solve the pain? When that ship got stuck in the Suez Canal,
Yeah.
the word finally got out, but it shouldn't be finally got out. It should be, bam, like Waze. Hey, don't go on the canal. This is going to take us a while. Even though it seems longer, you got to go down and around Africa. So solving those problems, I think, is going to be a big challenge, but it'll be fun and I think very lucrative when people get it done.
So let me ask you one final question, certainly from an investment point of view. I mean, you just said that, the geo industry is a $10 billion industry, relatively small in comparison to others. What's it going to take to get to the next level, do you think? Where do we need to break out? Where do we need to position companies?
I think products and analytics, as I said before, there is a lot of information in the stuff that the geospatial industry gathers, but it has to be made user-friendly. Even some of the leaders in software are not sufficiently user-friendly. And they think more from the engineering or technology standpoint than from the user standpoint. I don't want to cite somebody who might be a competitor to you, but IBM had a great ad for years which said, stop selling what you have, start selling what they need. And I took that as a mantra at GEOEYE, and I said, let's stop selling what we have. Let's go figure out what they need. Larry Page of Google has a great phrase: figure out something that somebody is going to use every day, like a toothbrush. So if they're going to use it like a toothbrush every day, you're going to get a lot of uses. So we have to help people figure out how we can solve those pain points, like in the shipping industry. How can we make it more efficient? Why are there these bottlenecks? By the way, so think of my example before: ships coming to the port of LA and Long Beach, and it's crowded, so throttle back. If they throttle back, they're burning less oil. Oh, by the way, that helps our emissions picture. Oh, well, maybe I can get a better ESG credit. And there's a whole lot of information going on right now that's derived from satellites and drones. DCVC just invested in a company called Kairos that flies planes over oil and gas manufacturing facilities, refineries. Every refinery emits some methane. It's just a fact of life. It just comes out. What these guys do is help the refineries find that and plug it. Now, they would like to plug it anyway because it's, no one likes leaks. With all the focus on ESG, it becomes more compelling for them to plug those methane leaks, because then they can say, hey, you may feel badly about oil and gas, but at least we're doing the best we can to produce it in a non-polluting way. So whereas DCVC prefers stuff that is oriented toward alternative sources of energy or more energy efficiency, we're happy to help the oil and gas guys become more efficient if it then reduces the bad aspects of the production facility. That's a geospatial product that I don't know that people would have thought of a while ago. Yeah. And, that's good on all sorts of levels.
Well, Matt, thanks. This has been a really fascinating conversation. Your insights are always appreciated. And again, thanks for taking the time to do this.
Joe, it's always a pleasure talking to you. It's fun talking to somebody smart. It's like playing good tennis. You know what I mean? This is like the US Open of geospatial right here, Joe.
I love that. When I get my tennis game in shape, I'll come back and we'll play together.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks again for joining us on another On Point with Korem. And if you like today's podcast, please leave a comment in the comment box where this podcast is posted, which could be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. I hope you'll join us next time for another On Point with Korem, where we'll get on point.